Hi, I'm Ben, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the Atkins diet. We'll examine it through the lens of science to determine whether it has any merit or whether it's total bogus. By the end of this video, you'll hopefully have a much better understanding of how food affects your body and how this information relates to the critical claims of the Atkins diet. So, what is the Atkins diet? The Atkins diet is a low-carbohydrate diet introduced in the 1960s by cardiologist Robert C. Atkins. It is built upon the belief that high-carbohydrate diets are the cause of obesity and health problems. As a result, the Atkins diet is primarily used as a weight loss technique, where followers minimize their carbohydrate intake and instead use a moderate amount of protein and a high amount of fat to constitute the bulk of their caloric consumption. Involved in the Atkins diet are multiple stages, each with varying restrictions on the amount of carbohydrates permitted. The currency of the diet is what's known as net carbs, which can be calculated for a given food by subtracting its fiber content from its carbohydrate content. For example, 100 grams of asparagus has 3.9 grams of carbohydrates and 2.1 grams of fiber, meaning it has a total of 1.8 grams of net carbs. In the first phase, carbohydrates are eliminated almost entirely, allowing a total of just 20 net carbs per day for 2 weeks. These should come from foundational vegetables like asparagus, broccoli, and cucumber, whilst other carbs, refined carbs in particular, should be avoided. Almost all calories should instead come from foods high in protein and fat, such as meat, seafood, poultry, and cheese. The next phase involves continuing the deficit in carb-rich foods, but allows for the gradual reintroduction of some nutrient-rich veggies, berries, nuts, and seeds. This is, of course, contingent on continual weight loss and should last until you're 10 pounds from your goal. The third phase involves a gradual increment of 10 grams per week to the daily net carb restriction. Once again, the range of carbs allowed may be extended, but is contingent on continual weight loss. The final stage is entered when you have achieved your desired weight. The diet claims that you should not only be happy with your body fat levels, but you should also have an understanding of your body's carbohydrate tolerance, enabling you to continue the diet for life. But does the Atkins diet work? Let's dive a bit deeper into the supposed science behind the Atkins diet. The primary claim that underpins the Atkins diet is that carbs break down into glucose, which stimulates the release of insulin, and insulin causes the body to store energy from food as fat. Therefore, limiting carbs limits insulin release, which causes the body to burn fat instead of sugar. To evaluate the legitimacy of this statement, we first need to understand how our bodies break down carbohydrates. Carbs are essentially made of sugars, which are great for our bodies in moderation. When we eat carbohydrates, glucose, a kind of sugar, is deposited into our bloodstream to be transported around our bodies as fuel for energy. When this happens, our body releases insulin to prevent our blood sugar levels from getting too high. Insulin acts as a warning to our bodies that we should stop processing so much sugar, and should instead send some of it to short-term storage. Glucose is stored in the body as glycogen, which serves as a ready source of glucose for other organs and tissues throughout the body when blood glucose levels begin to decline. When glycogen stores are full, excess glucose is then converted to fat and stored in adipocyte cells. Now we can tackle the original claim. It is true that the release of glucose stimulates the release of insulin, and that insulin can indirectly lead to the storage of fat. But there are a few points to consider. This statement implies that carbs alone are responsible for the creation of insulin, and thus the buildup of body fat. This is incorrect, as studies have shown that beef can cause similar levels of insulin increase to breakfast cereals, which are high in sugar. The kinds of carbs eaten are also important, as different foods have different effects on your blood sugar levels, which is something we will explore in more depth shortly. As mentioned earlier, glucose is only converted to fat when glycogen stores are full, meaning that volume plays a large role in determining whether carbs are converted into body fat. In fact, excess consumption of fats and proteins will also end up being converted to body fat. This leads us to the primary takeaway on dieting. Whilst it is important to have a healthy balance of the 3 macronutrients, it is ultimately the overall caloric intake that most affects weight loss. Carbs alone are not the enemy of weight loss. Therefore, Much of the success of the Atkins diet can be attributed to the calorie deficit introduced by eliminating carbs. In theory, individuals could compensate this deficit entirely with fats and protein, and would have no weight change. Many dietitians actually prescribe a variant of the Atkins diet for the purpose of weight gain. Why is this? As previously mentioned, caloric intake ultimately determines weight change. A surplus of calories is much easier to obtain through a high-fat diet than through a high-carb diet. This is because there are more than twice as many calories per gram of fat compared to a gram of carbohydrates. This should clearly dispel the myth that not eating carbs will lead to weight loss. The Atkins diet says that you can expect to lose up to 6.8 kilograms in the first stage, some of which may be water weight. In this stage, it is possible to enter a state known as ketosis. Our bodies enter ketosis when there is an insufficient amount of sugar in our blood to serve as fuel for energy. As a result, we begin breaking down fat cells into molecules called ketone bodies for fuel instead. So, is this healthy? Research has shown evidence of faster weight loss for individuals on low-carb or ketogenic diets like the Atkins diet, compared to those on a traditional diet. However, these results disappeared over time when individuals began eating normally again due to what's known as the yo-yo effect. In addition, extreme carb deprivation can lead to constipation, fatigue, dizziness, and nausea, so it should be done with extreme care. The Atkins diet claims that eating carbs leads to health-related issues like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Whilst it is true that an excessive sugar intake can lead to these diseases, it is important to note that food quality plays a large role on the overall effect on your health. As mentioned earlier, foods have varying effects on your blood sugar levels. The glycemic load and glycemic index are two metrics that measure exactly this. High glycemic loads indicate that food will spike your blood sugar faster, which is not desired as it leads to type 2 diabetes among other diseases. As a rule of thumb, stick to foods with glycemic loads of 11 or lower. The modern-day Western diet is made up of huge amounts of starchy white potatoes, pastas, breads, and rice, which have glycemic loads of 40 and above. Simple sugars like those found in honey and fruit are much more likely to be turned into fat than those found in complex carbs like whole grains and vegetables. This is because the short chains in simple sugars are easily broken down by your digestive system, allowing them to be absorbed into your bloodstream very quickly. They are usually also found in processed foods like candy and syrups, and should not make up the bulk of your carbohydrate intake. There is therefore merit in cutting down carbohydrate intake as the Atkins diet suggests. However, this should be done by eating low GL foods, whilst ensuring a healthy balance of macronutrients. Certain vegetables like eggplant, peppers, and broccoli are all good sources of low GL carbohydrates, as well as other nutrients like vitamins and minerals. Another general rule of thumb is that your plate should be 75% vegetables by volume, and you can choose which ones based on your personal preference for overall carbohydrate intake. Supplementing calories with foods that are high in saturated fat is also not advised, as it is known that an excess of saturated fats can lead to a myriad of health issues. In summary, the Atkins diet says that low carb leads to weight loss. Calorie deficits are the only way to lose weight, regardless of what macronutrient split you have. So, although the Atkins diet may indirectly lead to weight loss, carbs are not the enemy of body fat. There are many health benefits to having low carb intakes, but having a high amount of carbs is perfectly healthy as long as you are eating the right kinds of foods.